In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned with an intensity that could melt the hulls of lesser ships, the Kryloth Empire reigned supreme. Their warriors were feared across the cosmos, their technology unmatched, and their resolve unyielding. Among them was Commander Lyra Voss, a battle-hardened Kryloth warrior known for her tactical brilliance and unrelenting ferocity. Her name was whispered in fear by her enemies and spoken with reverence by her comrades. But beneath her armored exterior and the cold, calculating demeanor, Lyra harbored a secret, a growing disillusionment with the endless cycle of war. The Kryloth Empire had been at war with the Terran Alliance for decades. What had started as a skirmish over resource-rich planets had escalated into a full-scale conflict, consuming entire star systems and leaving billions dead. Lyra had fought in countless battles, her hands stained with the blood of both enemies and allies. She had always believed in the righteousness of the Kryloth cause, but as the years passed, she began to question the cost of their conquests. It was during the Battle of Cygnus Prime that Lyra's doubts reached a breaking point. The Terran Alliance had established a stronghold on the planet, and the Kryloth High Command had ordered its destruction. Lyra led the assault, her fleet descending upon the planet like a swarm of angry wasps. The battle was fierce, the skies filled with the flashes of energy weapons and the screams of dying soldiers. As Lyra's forces pushed deeper into the Terran defenses, she found herself face to face with a Terran soldier who would change her life forever. The soldier's name was Captain Elias Drake, a seasoned veteran of the Terran Alliance. He was a man of principle, driven by a desire to protect his people and end the war. When Lyra and Elias crossed paths on the battlefield, it was not with the intent to kill, but to survive. Their encounter was brief, a clash of blades and an exchange of gunfire, but in that moment, something shifted within Lyra. She saw something in Elias's eyes, a determination, a humanity, that she had never seen in her own kind. As the battle raged on, Lyra made a decision that would alter the course of her life. She ordered her troops to retreat, leaving the Terran stronghold intact. It was an act of defiance against the Kryloth High Command, and one that would not go unnoticed. Lyra knew that her actions would have consequences, but for the first time in her life, she felt a sense of clarity. She could no longer be a pawn in a war that had no end, no purpose. Returning to her ship, Lyra was met with the cold, accusing eyes of her superiors. They demanded an explanation for her retreat, but Lyra remained silent. She knew that no words could justify her actions, and she was prepared to face the consequences. But as she stood before the High Command, she realized that she could no longer serve an empire that valued conquest over compassion. In a bold and unprecedented move, Lyra renounced her allegiance to the Kryloth Empire. She declared that she would no longer fight in their wars, that she would seek a new path, one that did not involve the destruction of innocent lives. Her declaration sent shockwaves through the empire, and she was branded a traitor. But Lyra did not care. She had made her choice, and she would stand by it, no matter the cost. As she fled the Kryloth fleet, Lyra knew that her journey was far from over. She was now a fugitive, hunted by her own kind and distrusted by the Terran Alliance. But she also knew that she could not go back. She had seen the face of humanity in Captain Elias Drake, and it had awakened something within her, a desire for peace, for understanding, for a life beyond war. And so, Lyra set out on a new path, one that would lead her to the heart of the Terran Alliance and to the man who had unknowingly changed her life. She did not know what the future held, but she was determined to find out. For the first time in her life, Lyra Voss was free, and she would fight to protect that freedom, no matter the cost. Lyra Voss was now a fugitive, a traitor to the Kryloth Empire. Her decision to abandon the war had left her with few allies and even fewer options. The Kryloth High Command had issued a bounty on her head, and every bounty hunter in the galaxy was eager to claim it. Lyra knew that she could not stay in Kryloth space, but the Terran Alliance was no safe haven either. To them, she was still the enemy, a Kryloth warrior who had spilled the blood of countless Terran soldiers. But Lyra was determined to find a way to bridge the gap between her people and the Terrans. She believed that there had to be a way to end the war, to find a peace that did not involve the annihilation of one side or the other. And so, she set out on a journey that would take her to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, in search of answers and allies. Her first stop was the planet of Valen, a neutral world that served as a hub for traders, smugglers, and refugees from all corners of the galaxy. It was a place where one could disappear, at least for a while. Lyra knew that she would need to lay low and gather resources before she could make her next move. She also knew that she would need to find someone who could help her navigate the complexities of Terran society. It was on Valen that Lyra met Jackson Rourke, a former Terran intelligence officer who had been dishonorably discharged for his involvement in a failed coup attempt. Jackson was a man with a troubled past, but he was also a man with a deep understanding of the Terran Alliance and its inner workings. He was skeptical of Lyra at first, but he saw something in her, a determination, a sincerity, that made him willing to give her a chance. Jackson agreed to help Lyra, but only if she agreed to help him in return. He had his own agenda, a personal vendetta against the Terran officials who had betrayed him. Lyra agreed to his terms, knowing that she would need his expertise if she was to have any hope of achieving her goals. Together, Lyra and Jackson began to piece together a plan. They knew that they would need to gain the trust of the Terran Alliance, but that would not be easy. Lyra's reputation as a Kryloth warrior preceded her, and many Terrans would see her as a threat rather than an ally. They would need to find a way to prove her intentions, to show that she was truly committed to peace. Their first step was to gather intelligence on the Terran Alliance's military operations. Jackson still had contacts within the Terran intelligence community, and he used them to gather information on the Alliance's plans and strategies. Lyra, with her knowledge of Kryloth tactics, was able to provide valuable insights into how the Kryloth Empire might respond to Terran moves. As they worked together, Lyra and Jackson began to form a bond. They were both outcasts, both searching for redemption in their own ways. Lyra found herself opening up to Jackson in a way that she had never done with anyone before. She told him about her doubts, her fears, and her hopes for the future. Jackson, in turn, shared his own story, his own struggles, and his own dreams. But their journey was not without its dangers. The Kryloth Empire had not forgotten about Lyra, and they were determined to bring her to justice. Bounty hunters and Kryloth agents were constantly on their trail, and Lyra and Jackson had to be constantly on the move. They faced numerous close calls, but each time they managed to escape, their bond growing stronger with each shared victory. As they traveled from planet to planet, Lyra and Jackson began to hear rumors of a growing movement within the Terran Alliance, a movement that sought to end the war with the Kryloth Empire through diplomacy rather than force. This was exactly the kind of opportunity that Lyra had been hoping for. If they could find a way to connect with this movement, they might be able to bring about the change that they both desired. But reaching out to the Terran peace movement would not be easy. They would need to find a way to gain the trust of its leaders, to prove that Lyra was sincere in her desire for peace. And they would need to do so without alerting the Kryloth Empire or the more hawkish elements within the Terran Alliance. As they prepared to make their next move, Lyra and Jackson knew that they were stepping into uncharted territory. They were no longer just fugitives on the run, they were now players in a much larger game, one that could determine the fate of the galaxy. But they were ready. They had each other, and they had a shared purpose. And with that, they set out to find the leaders of the Terran peace movement, hoping that they could be the key to ending the war once and for all. Lyra Voss and Jackson Rourke had come a long way since their first meeting on Valen. They had survived countless dangers, outsmarted bounty hunters, and gathered valuable intelligence on both the Kryloth Empire and the Terran Alliance. But their journey was far from over. The next step in their quest for peace was to make contact with the leaders of the Terran peace movement, a group of influential figures within the Terran Alliance who were advocating for an end to the war through diplomacy. The peace movement was a loosely organized coalition of politicians, military officers, and civilians who believed that the war with the Krylov Empire was a futile and destructive endeavor. They argued that the resources being poured into the war effort could be better used to improve the lives of the Terran people, and that a negotiated peace with the Krylov Empire was not only possible, but necessary. Lyra and Jackson knew that gaining the trust of the peace movement would be a difficult task. Many within the movement were deeply suspicious of the Krylov Empire, and Lyra's past as a Krylov warrior would make her a hard sell. But they also knew that if they could convince the movement's leaders of Lyra's sincerity, they might be able to use their influence to push for peace talks. Their first target was Senator Ilara Voss, no relation to Lyra, a prominent member of the Terran Senate and one of the most vocal advocates for peace. Senator Voss had been a staunch critic of the war for years, and she had the political clout to make things happen. If anyone could help Lyra and Jackson, it was her. But getting to Senator Voss would not be easy. She was heavily guarded, and her schedule was tightly controlled. Lyra and Jackson would need to find a way to get close to her without alerting her security detail or drawing the attention of the more hawkish elements within the Terran Alliance. After weeks of planning, Lyra and Jackson finally found their opportunity. Senator Voss was scheduled to give a speech at a peace rally on the planet of New Eden, a world known for its strong anti-war sentiment. The rally would be the perfect place for Lyra and Jackson to make their move. Disguised as civilians, Lyra and Jackson blended into the crowd at the rally, keeping a low profile as they waited for the right moment. When Senator Voss took the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. She spoke passionately about the need for peace, about the futility of war, and about the importance of finding common ground with the Krylov Empire. As the rally came to an end, Lyra and Jackson made their move. They managed to slip past security and approach Senator Voss as she was leaving the stage. Lyra introduced herself, explaining who she was and why she had come. Senator Voss was initially skeptical, but as Lyra spoke, she began to see the sincerity in her eyes. Lyra told Senator Voss about her journey, about her disillusionment with the Krylov Empire, and about her desire to find a way to end the war. She spoke of the lives that had been lost, the worlds that had been destroyed, and the futility of it all. She told Senator Voss that she believed that peace was possible, but that it would require courage and leadership from both sides. Senator Voss listened intently, her initial skepticism giving way to a growing sense of hope. She had spent years advocating for peace, but she had always felt like she was fighting an uphill battle. Now, here was a Krylov warrior, a former enemy, standing before her and offering to help. It was a moment of profound significance, one that could change the course of the war. After a long conversation, Senator Voss agreed to help Lyra and Jackson. She would use her influence to arrange a meeting with other key members of the peace movement, and together, they would work to push for peace talks with the Krylov Empire. It was a risky move, one that could cost Senator Voss her career, but she believed that it was worth it. As Lyra and Jackson left the rally, they felt a sense of hope that they had not felt in a long time. They had taken the first step towards peace, but they knew that the road ahead would be difficult. They would face opposition from both the Krylov Empire and the Terran Alliance, and they would need to navigate a complex web of politics and intrigue. But they were ready. They had each other, and they had a shared purpose. And with that, they set out to meet with the other leaders of the Terran peace movement, hoping that together, they could bring an end to the war and forge a new future for the galaxy. The meeting with Senator Ilara Voss had been a turning point for Lyra Voss and Jackson Rourke. With the senator's support, they were able to gain access to the inner circles of the Terran peace movement. Over the next several weeks, they met with a diverse group of individuals who shared their desire to end the war with the Krylov Empire. These included high-ranking military officers, influential politicians, and prominent activists, all of whom had grown disillusioned with the endless conflict. The peace movement was not a monolithic entity, it was a coalition of individuals with different motivations and agendas. Some, like Senator Voss, were driven by a genuine desire to save lives and prevent further destruction. Others were motivated by political expediency, seeing the war as a drain on resources that could be better used elsewhere. Still others were driven by personal grievances, having lost loved ones in the conflict and wanting to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate. Despite their differences, the members of the peace movement were united in their belief that the war needed to end. They had been working behind the scenes for years, gathering support and building a case for peace. But they had always lacked a catalyst, something, or someone, that could push their efforts over the edge and force the Terran Alliance to seriously consider peace talks. Lyra Voss was that catalyst. Her defection from the Kryloth Empire and her willingness to work with the Terran peace movement was a powerful symbol. It showed that peace was not only possible, but that it was desired by individuals on both sides of the conflict. Lyra's presence gave the peace movement a credibility that it had previously lacked, and it opened doors that had been closed to them before. But not everyone was pleased with Lyra's involvement. There were those within the Terran Alliance who saw her as a threat, a Kryloth warrior who could not be trusted. These individuals, many of whom held positions of power within the military and the government, were deeply invested in the war effort. They believed that the only way to achieve victory was through total annihilation of the Kryloth Empire, and they viewed the peace movement as a dangerous distraction. As Lyra and Jackson worked to build support for peace talks, they found themselves increasingly targeted by these hawkish elements. They were followed, harassed, and even threatened. Attempts were made to discredit them, with false accusations and smear campaigns being launched against them. But Lyra and Jackson refused to be deterred. They knew that the stakes were too high to back down. The situation came to a head when a group of hardline military officers attempted to assassinate Lyra during a public appearance. The attempt was thwarted by Jackson, who had been keeping a close eye on Lyra's security. The incident was a wake-up call for the peace movement, and it galvanized their efforts. They realized that they could no longer work in the shadows, they needed to take their message to the people. With Senator Voss's help, Lyra and Jackson organized a series of public rallies and speeches, where they spoke out against the war and called for peace. Their message resonated with many, and support for the peace movement began to grow. But it also drew the ire of their enemies, who redoubled their efforts to silence them. As the pressure mounted, Lyra and Jackson knew that they were running out of time. They needed to make a decisive move, something that would force the Terran Alliance to the negotiating table. And they had an idea, a risky, audacious plan that could either end the war or plunge the galaxy into even greater chaos. The plan involved reaching out to a faction within the Kryloth Empire that was also seeking an end to the war. This faction, known as the Reformists, was made up of Kryloth citizens and soldiers who had grown weary of the endless conflict. They believed that the Empire's resources would be better spent on rebuilding and improving the lives of their people, rather than on waging war. Lyra had heard rumors of the Reformists during her time in the Kryloth military, but she had never had direct contact with them. Now, she and Jackson would need to find a way to make contact and convince them to join forces with the Terran peace movement. It was a long shot, but it was their best hope. As they prepared to make their move, Lyra and Jackson knew that they were stepping into uncharted territory. They were no longer just advocates for peace, they were now players in a high-stakes game of galactic politics. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they were determined to see their mission through to the end. Lyra Voss and Jackson Rourke stood at the precipice of a moment that could change the entire galaxy. The galaxy had been torn asunder by endless war, but now, for the first time in decades, there was a flicker of hope, an opportunity to end the suffering. Yet the road to peace was not without its dangers, and the forces opposed to it were powerful and relentless. The plan was ambitious, but it was their only option. If they could connect with the Reformists, a faction within the Kryloth Empire that sought peace, they might be able to leverage their influence to sway the more hawkish elements of the Kryloth military and the Terran Alliance. The key would be proving to both sides that peace was not just possible, it was essential for the survival of both empires. Lyra knew the risks all too well. The Kryloth Empire's intelligence network was vast, and if they caught wind of her dealings with the reformists, it would not only cost her life but potentially fracture the fragile coalition they had begun to build with the Terran peace movement. Jackson, always the pragmatist, had his doubts. They had both seen their fair share of betrayals, and it would only take one false move to ruin everything. But they pressed on. Their journey led them to a clandestine meeting on a forgotten moon orbiting a dying star, a place where the reformists had chosen to meet in secret. There, Lyra came face to face with the leader of the movement, General Zether, a once feared Kryloth military strategist who had grown disillusioned with the Empire's endless thirst for conquest. The general had seen enough carnage to last a lifetime and now believed that the Empire needed to change or perish. Lyra's meeting with Zether was tense at first, filled with the weight of old enmities and distrust. But as Lyra spoke of her journey, of her abandonment of the Kryloth cause, of the horrors she had witnessed on both sides of the war, the general listened, his face hardening as he saw the depth of her conviction. Zether had been among the first to question the Empire's relentless expansion, and now, seeing Lyra, a former warrior of the Kryloth, standing before him with a shared desire for peace, he realized that the time had come. The meeting was brief but crucial. Zether agreed to send a delegation to meet with the Terran peace movement, promising to use his influence within the Kryloth ranks to advocate for a ceasefire. But the challenge would not end there. Even with the reformists backing them, they needed to overcome the deep-rooted distrust that ran through both empires' leadership. The hawks on both sides, those who believed in the righteousness of their cause, would never allow peace without a fight. Lyra and Jackson, now with the full backing of the reformists, returned to the Terran alliance. They presented their proposal to Senator Ilara Voss and the leaders of the peace movement. The plan was simple: a summit with the Kryloth Empire, attended by both the Terran peace delegation and the reformists. But the Terran government was divided. Hardliners in the military were adamantly opposed to even considering peace talks, believing that the Kryloth Empire's defeat was inevitable. The summit almost never happened. Political pressure mounted, and several key members of the Terran Senate were assassinated in an apparent attempt to halt the peace efforts. The chaos almost derailed everything, but Lyra and Jackson, driven by the belief that they could make a difference, pushed forward. The moment of truth came when, on the eve of the summit, a covert faction within the Terran military attempted to sabotage the peace talks, planning an attack on the Kryloth delegation to spark an all-out war. The plot was uncovered just in time, thanks to Jackson's former intelligence contacts and Lyra's connections with the reformists. The situation was dire, and they had only hours to prevent disaster. With the help of Senator Voss and a handful of trustworthy allies, Lyra and Jackson orchestrated a daring plan to expose the coup attempt, turning public opinion in favor of peace. It was a last-ditch effort, a gamble that could either bring peace or doom them all. They managed to infiltrate the conspirators, broadcasting their intentions to the galaxy before they could strike. When the truth was revealed, the political tides shifted. The public, already weary from the endless war, rallied behind Lyra and the peace movement. The hawks within the Terran military were discredited, and the summit went ahead as planned. Both the Kryloth Empire and the Terran Alliance sent representatives to the neutral world of Valen, where the historic peace talks began. The summit was tense, fraught with suspicion and old grievances. But as the days passed, both sides slowly began to find common ground. Lyra, standing beside Jackson, knew that their work was far from over. The peace was fragile, a delicate thread that could unravel at any moment. But for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope that the cycle of war could be broken, that a new future could be forged for both the Kryloth Empire and the Terran Alliance. As the peace talks drew to a close, Lyra Voss stood before the assembly, a symbol of everything that could be achieved when one person was willing to defy the tides of war and fight for something greater. She had been a warrior, a fugitive, and a traitor, but now, she stood as a peacemaker, a bridge between two warring civilizations. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in a long while, it held its breath, waiting for the dawn of a new era. In the end, peace was achieved, not through the strength of arms, but through the strength of conviction, the courage to stand for what was right, and the unwavering belief that a better future was possible. Lyra and Jackson had done what many thought was impossible. They had changed the course of history. The war was over. The galaxy, though scarred, had begun to heal. And for Lyra Voss, that freedom she had fought for, the freedom to choose her own path, was a victory far greater than any battle she had ever fought. The war was over, but her journey was just beginning.